Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Creating Tailwinds Podcast by Flightpath Financial with your hosts, John Urbick and Jared Adams. Join us today as we discuss the power of infinite banking. And here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, a very big welcome to you. We've got a very special edition of Creating Tailwinds, Flightpath Financial's Tailwinds podcast. We have none other than Kit Darby from, many of you remember, the FAPA magazine that we all grew up on, trying to get into the airlines. And Kit has generously allowed us some of his time to talk about what he sees going forward. And so with us today, we have Jared Adams as well. And we're here to learn from Kit. And we can't wait to learn what the future holds for us aviators. So with that, Kit, if you wouldn't mind, for those, everybody knows who you are, but maybe some of the younger guys don't. If you wouldn't mind doing a quick bio and tell them who you are, sir.
Well, oddly enough, I'm an Army pilot by origin, which was very unusual back when I did it. But I was fortunate enough to be fixed wing initial entry during Vietnam. And was in for 8 years of active. And then I separated and got in the Georgia Guard flying OV-1s and did that for a balance of 23 years. Along the way, I got into the old FAPA, F-A-P-A, and built that up. But when I joined, they were doing $300,000 a year. And when I left, they were doing $3.6 million. Wow. So we had about 20,000 members. Pretty much 80% of everybody getting hired was a member. And I'm pretty sure the other 20% were reading somebody else's newsletter, magazine, salary survey, whatever. So been in that part of the business a long time. Along the way, I had some friends that were injured and they saw our salary survey and they asked questions about, they had a lawsuit and one of them had lost his sense of balance, fall in the bathtub, lost his career and was being offered a paltry amount. So we calculated what his career at that time at Capital Airlines would be worth. And that was the beginning. We started with a ledger. I laid it out and my bookkeeper filled in the numbers. Later, we went to Lotus 1, 2, 3, and finally to Excel. And today we make career models of pilots injured, killed, delayed, of their pay, benefits, and retirement for primarily personal injury. I work a lot of different types of cases, but the majority of it are personal injury cases. And that keeps me in the contracts and calculating these values pretty much every day. So I've thought I got two parts of I can present, and I'm going to start with the financial part, which is this earnings model that I do. And then we'll go in and look at the industry overall. So if you want, I can share my screen. I'm a retired United captain. My wife is too. Our son's the youngest pilot hired at Southwest and now the youngest captain at Southwest. So we still are in the career business. We do application reviews, we write resumes, and we do interview prep. We still do those portions of it. Quite honestly, I enjoy that, but the one that pays the bills is the expert witness portion. Our most famous case is probably the Bagram 747 that went in several years ago. And I had 3 pilots, 2 flight engineers, and a load master on that I built career models for. And the 3 pilots alone got 114 million. So it's a big business for that liability portion of if people are, I don't get into the liability. I just put a dollar value on what it's worth. So I'm not picking sides either way. I'm just going to say what the career is worth. And we'll look at one of those now. So I'm going to share my screen if it's okay.
Kit, while you're doing that, how somebody that's in that circumstance, perhaps out there listening, how do they reach you?
Well, just Google my name, Kit Darby. My website's the same, kitdarby@gmail.com. Okay. And I will have, so if you've got Kit Darby and can put a .com on the end of it, you got it.
Wonderful.
And of course, that'll be the easiest way. Welcome to call me anytime. My phone numbers are listed on that website, email as well. Email's the same, kitdarby@gmail. So hopefully, most people that will view today's presentation don't need me today, and we hope they never need me. But if the occasion comes where they do have to establish a career value, and we can do it even for a delay. I've had successful cases with 3 or 6 month delays due to no fault of their own. And of course, the largest cases are young pilots that are on their way up that lose their license or their life. So here's the sort of and I made this. I've been sort of pulling this together from other spreadsheets, and it was a little choppy. So I tried to put it into a slide presentation, and I did that this morning. So I can't spell and punctuate too good. I'd be surprised if there weren't a few errors in the words, but at least the text, the Excel portion should be good. The pictures and diagrams should be accurate. And I apologize in advance for any typos. That I did no proofing. I just did it, and here it is.
Well,
So
we're glad you're here. So
we start out, looking at career values, objective to understand the considerations and sources, airline pilot pay, benefits, and retirement. Pretty straightforward. Comes right from the contracts. Regrettably, they're 200, 300 pages and pretty hard to interpret sometimes. So I have to bring them down to apples and apples. The most common thing I do is all the major airlines, 13 majors, working off all their contracts, and the regionals. But of course, there's too many regionals, like 30. So I picked the 7 largest ones, which covers about 85% of the jobs. And I take a young pilot through flight instructing, a few years at the regional as a captain, to the majors, to their actuarial life, using the contracts. So we start out with a salary survey. So we do a annual salary survey, taking this contract information and putting it into a standard format. So years of service, airplanes flown, and we draw from that, of course, to make our future forecast. And we have no future raises. I'm not an economist, so I can, but I don't add anything to it or take anything away from it. That concept of present value. So if that's needed, and it depends on the venue, what state you're in or what court you're in, whether you need to do that or not. I've been very successful. The 114 million was without a present value. And the reason for that is we do what's called the offset theory, which is the increases are offset by the decreases. In fact, I'll show you information here where since 2010, pilots have doubled the inflation rate. So actually, future values are higher than the values I'm going to show. Now, that's a tough concept for courts and judges and juries to understand, but pilot pay has dramatically increased faster than inflation, and I'll show that information later. So we start with this salary survey. We make some assumptions about the career, age, flight time progression through the different career options, how long you're going to live from an actuarial, that type of thing. And I know you can't read this, but the idea is there's one of these spreadsheets for each airline, and we take it year by year. We measure. We put the equipment in based on the current fleet. So if you've got 25% 777s, and on the end you're going to end up 25% 777 or 350, whatever that highest pay rate is. On the right side in the yellow, every 5 years I do a summary. So this is a 40-year career, and we realize that most people don't have a 40-year career, very few. But I calculate the whole thing. My clients range from in the teens to in their 60s. So I sort of make the whole thing, and then I pull away the pieces that I need for my study. So at the top are the active earnings. We have pay, benefits, retirement, and I'm going to be adding profit sharing. I've added profit sharing to a couple. Profit sharing was problematic because it's not consistent, but I now have like an 18-year history on profit sharing. So it's becoming a long enough trend that we can use it, and we'll show the profit sharing results later on. The bottom part is simply retirement values. And other than the lump sum from the 401k, there's not a lot of retirement benefits, very minimal, travel, credit union, maybe some reduced cost insurance, that type of stuff. But there's not a lot in the retirement values other than that lump sum from the 401k or whatever that company might call it. I have factored in the increasing retirement contributions, and you see that in the middle of the screen in 3 colors with a green box around it. So I do factor in those increasing retirement percentages based on the years in the future. So to break it down a little bit more, we start out with the pay information, and I use 11 years to captain, and I realize that United had captains off the street, and Delta certainly had captains in the first few years. And when I talk to pilots, they always bring that up. For the work I do in a court, what we have, the promotion has to be probable, meaning 51% of the pilots have to be captains, not the first one. And typically 8 to 10 years. So I use 11 to be conservative. I progress people through the equipment based on the percentage of the equipment in the fleet, the current fleet, although they may have a change in the fleet going forward, certain mix of small, medium, large aircraft. We also look at the benefits, and the benefits, retirement is a benefit, but that non-retirement benefit is very difficult to come up with. And the reason I say that is it's like a buffet. People can choose from it what they want, how much of this, how much of that. Depends on how big their family is, how healthy they are, how much they travel. It's all over the place. So I go to the Form 41, which is a government reporting form, and I look at the amount of money they pay the pilots, and I look at the amount of money they list for the pilot benefits, and I divide. It's pretty simple. So across the board, about 35–40% benefits based on the company's calculation, and retirement's part of that. So I take retirement out 15% or so, and that leaves about 15% non-retirement benefits. All the insurances, life insurance, medical, dental, vision, all the things that the company pays the majority of it. And of course, pilots at most airlines pay a small portion of that. So about 15% non-retirement benefits, and the actual retirement formula for the retirements. So we also do the same with a summary on the end of it, total career values, average per year. So at better companies, Delta, United, American, these average values over the year divided by all the years, up over 600,000. And of course, on an individual year's basis, at the end, you're getting interest on a huge 401k plus your normal pay. So it really gets up there toward the end. This is a pay hour grid that I use. We all know somebody who rides the minimum guarantee, and we know pilots that get an incredible amount of flight time each month for pay, and there are limits on what you can do. So it comes out 1,000 hours a year is about 83 hours a month. When you look at the averages, I've had inside information on a few companies where I see what they actually get. I've had that at American, FedEx, and a couple of others. And it turns out that the average pilot gets about 5 hours more than the bid. So if you were bid 80, when it's done due to delays, training, vacations, whatever it is, at the end of the month, over the years, pilots get about 5 hours more than they bid. So I don't use that, but just a reminder that you do typically get more than the middle between the guarantee and the maximum is a sort of a sweet spot if we don't have an actual number. And there are a few companies that get very little. Some of the smaller freight companies have very low utilization of aircraft and pilots. So when you put it into a grid, looking at the number of pilots, career earnings, active benefits, A fund, which only exists at UPS and FedEx, and then the retirement benefits and the 401k, B fund, C fund, whatever we call it, put those together. The bottom right corner is, again, a 40-year career, so that's a very high number. It's proportionate, though, to shorter careers, and we see that it's about 61% earnings, and that's without profit sharing. So when you look at your W-2, it only represents 2/3 of what you make or what your career value is. So there's a lot of additional value there that we need to plan on. So to put it on a chart, sort of looks like this for 40 years. And again, $20–25, the numbers will actually be higher in the future due to the rapidly increasing pilot pay in relation to inflation. So this is the pay raises over time, annual increases from 2010. I do have it a little bit further back, but you see my pointer okay? So the overall average is 26%, 5.26%, and and then 5.8 most recently, and inflation 2.47. So over the term of this table, the increase in inflation 15.4 and pilot pay 31.8. So the color coding is the red was the most recent one at the time, and the blues were the initial raises in the contract, the green the subsequent raises. So we now look out to 2028, and we continue to have an increasing pilot pay faster than inflation, double the rate of inflation. So I know it may not feel that way. I mean, our money doesn't seem to go as far as it used to, but we certainly have when you put it on a chart. So the blue trend line is for pilot pay, and the orange trend line is for the consumer price index or inflation. They're almost identical. I've plotted them both on this bottom chart, consumer price index and inflation, and pilot pay in the green. So we are doing well and continue to do well with these forecast future raises. So profit sharing, like I said, that's not in the numbers I showed you. I'm starting to use it now. There's 3 or 4 other companies that have profit sharing, and I don't have a good history for them. The ones that I have a good history are listed here. The highest profit sharing this year was Alaska. Delta has the highest 18-year average, but this is significant. Over a 30-year career, profit sharing could add $900,000 to your earnings in today's dollars. That's a really nice piece. And the good news is for American and United is they have matched Delta had the best formula, and they have matched that formula going forward. Now, will they be as profitable as Delta? I don't know, but at least they have the same formula. So I would expect their profit sharing to go up significantly, and overall average 5.5% a year. So take whatever your earnings are and add 5.5% on average if you have profit sharing. And there's 4 companies that have it that I haven't been able to track. If anybody knows the numbers for these Hawaiian and Allegiant and other companies that have profit sharing, I would dearly love to see them. So this is something we did just recently. We took the current advanced entitlement and we took the high man, low man list, and we put together the junior and senior man in category, how many in category, and then we found the median guy. Remember, in my work, it has to be 51%. So I find the median guy and put got his birthday and his years of service. So the average captain has 17 years of service. And we did the same thing with first officers. The average first officer was 40 with 5.6 years of service. So that was I was working on a particular case involving a Delta pilot, and I needed to know what the career progression would likely look like. And I wanted to compare it to my normal 11 years to captain, which is conservative, but not as much as you might think. Long term, a lot of people choose not to upgrade for young kids, parents to take care of, whatever. 10, 11 years normally. During the great boom in hiring during 22, 23, it did go down a little bit, but long term, 10 or 11 years is not an unreasonable number for a promotion schedule. So I also do a little diagram on seniority, just because a lot of people that are not pilots or have not worked in a seniority promotion system have a little trouble. And the new people are always interested in how rank is assigned in class for the first time around. So I've put that on a little table. I've published most of this on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So if you're looking for these charts in greater detail, you probably can find them there. So we start out with the assumptions. So I meant to do majors first. That's a typo in my. So whatever it is, we make an assumption for the person, their age, when they would be hired at whatever level, regional, major. We look at their actuarial. These are the 7 airlines that I use. And when you put it, after you get done with it, when you put it on it, it's amazing how much regional pay has gone up. Starting pay has gone up 400 to 500%, and captain's pay has doubled. Retirement programs have been improved. This is only pay and bonus. This is not including their retirement contributions. The big difference in the regionals and the majors is that the majors have pretty much 100% company paid retirement, whereas the regionals have a good retirement, but it requires a pilot participation, usually about half from the pilot, half from the company. So that's the difference. And assumptions are down here at the regionals: 5 years to captain, flying 85 hours a month for pay, current fleet, no future pay increases. That's under the current contract today. So no premium pay, no extra flying, just 85 hours. So yeah, I guess I stuck that regional stuff in front of the major. I didn't realize I'd done that. Okay, so the regional, there's a grid for the regionals, number of pilots, so forth. But this $12 million 40-year career value, those are values we used to see at the majors. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that a $12 million number, and of course, you can have a 40-year career at the regional. It'd be pretty tough at a major, but hired at 25, working till 65, that's 40 years. So you can definitely do that as a regional pilot. And we're seeing some regional pilots that choose to stay at the regionals for lifestyle, to be a captain, and they're certainly making well above the average income in the U.S. for an individual or a family, for that matter. So it's a good job. Whereas the starting pay in the beginning was not a living wage. When you put it on a chart, it's amazing how close they are together. So airlines were pulling pilots from one airline to another by having a better deal. So everybody's pretty much got the same deal. Very, very close now. Bonuses have pretty much gone away. I should have put the regional average pay chart up, but the starting pay was up to 108 a year or so ago. It's back down to about 98 or 100 now due to the absence of bonuses, initial signing bonuses. But still, 98,000 when it used to be 23, not bad,
Yeah.
not bad. So there's the grid, pretty much 85 hours for the regionals. So I don't know if you have any questions on that. I mean, it's a lot of information pretty quick, but to
That
sort
was
of show you
wonderful.
what we do, and it does create substantial individual wealth if you manage it, and gives you something to work with. The beauty of it is a retirement you can actually retire on. I mean, half the U.S. doesn't have a 401k. When they do, it's a 4 to 6% deal, maybe requires some matching. And here
Right.
we have an average of 16 or 17% on wages that are 3 times the average, 4 times the average. So it really is an excellent job. So
Well, yeah.
let me get into my other presentation here. Okay, so yeah, this was my original COVID diagram, day one, without having any idea what was going to happen. And then the next one was a little bit further in, where the red is the actual and what I thought would happen. And then finally, this is the latest version where it was through the end of 2021. And what happened, of course, was it did come back to my center line there, but we had down at the bottom the vaccines 1 and 2, 3, and the booster. So and later on I'll show you one that has the CARES Act contributions in it. And toward the end of this, we had this is just the business of flying, not pilots per se, but RPMs, however you want to look at it. It is actually RPMs is what we were using. So we had clearly two types of recoveries. We had domestic and international. And international, you couldn't go anywhere. If you did go, you had to quarantine for 2 weeks. I mean, international just didn't work. But domestic came back reasonably quick. And then, of course, we have pilot retirements, which continued, although we had some early retirements. And we encourage people to look at the percentages, not the numbers. I mean, if you have 100 pilots and retire 50 pilots, everybody's a captain. If you have 17,000 pilots and retire 50 pilots, you might get a weekend off. I mean, it's just not a big deal. It's percentages, not numbers. So this was a chart that I did a while back, forecasting based on age 65, and then estimating the regionals, the corporate, the early and medical retirements. So we have our demand for about 4,041 pilots, 100 pilots a year for retirements alone. That's no growth. And typically it's half and half. Typically half growth, half retirement. We're pretty high on retirements right now, so maybe a little more than half, but half retirement, half growth. And it's the growth part that's so hard to predict. The retirements are relatively predictable based on age 65, which we're able to find from a variety of sources. And when you put it all together, a demand for 80,000 pilots by 2040. And then the thing that was most interesting is that, well, it's nice to forecast the traffic, but pilots don't really care about the traffic. They're interested in the jobs. So I then converted it to jobs. So they were going to furlough 10 to 20,000 pilots. That was the plan. They warned 10,000. So the WARN Act requires a 30-day notice for union members that might be furloughed. So they warned 10, and they were getting ready to warn another 10. It didn't happen because of the CARES Act. So, and the early retirements helped out a lot too. So later on, I made another version, and here comes the CARES Acts and the vaccines. So we had the vaccines and the booster. We had CARES 1, 2, and 3. And by the time they got to the end of 2021, it wasn't over, but they could see that it was going to be over. So you can't furlough somebody for 3 months, 6 months, especially at airlines like Delta, United, American, because you've got all these different people flying different airplanes, and the big ones bump down to the medium, and the medium bump down to the small, and maybe the small get furloughed. It's very expensive, very time consuming. So if you can see that you're not going to need to furlough for long, it's better not to furlough at all. The other thing was the CARES Act had a mandate that we will pay all kinds of things, give you loans, pay salaries, do all kinds of stuff, but you can't furlough anybody. So there were a few people furloughed, a handful for a week or two, and the CARES Act came out with that stipulation. Everybody came back. So the bottom line was nobody was actually furloughed for an extended period at COVID, and many people don't realize that, even some pilots, but certainly non-pilots are assuming that, like everything else, airlines took a big hit. And the reason for this, and I'll show you the chart later on, is our government in this industry alone put in $243 billion to keep everybody paid, everything working, airplanes flying. And it was a godsend because we came out of COVID with everybody current, the airplanes still flying, a very competitive position in what turns out to be a worldwide market. So, and of course, international doing finally recovered and doing well. So the early retirements helped. I initially thought we would start hiring in late or mid 2022, but the early retirements, 5,000 of them, which is a full year's worth of hiring at peak levels, brought the hiring back to the middle of 2021. So historically, we had pilot hiring of 5,000 pilots 3 times in history. And the 4th time was the last half of 2021. So we hired 5,000 people in 6 months in the last half of 2021. And then we went on to hire 12 to 13,000 the next 2 years. So in a 2.5-year period, we hired 30,000, which is 6 times the previous peak. So it's an incredible generational hiring boom that was partly made possible by the contributions of the CARES Act. Of course, there were some downsides to the CARES Act. When you put that much money into an economy and restrict the supply of the commodities, you end up with some inflation. So it was pretty much inevitable if you're going to put that much support into the economy that you were going to have a significant amount of inflation. I was surprised it came down as quickly as it did. So I'll show you some charts on that a little bit later. So this is the 243 billion contribution with the wage subsidies, loans, direct aid, cash, guarantees, tickets, I mean, on and on and on. But 243 billion is no small. And this is only one industry. I mean, the nationwide, it was trillions that put in to support the economy. Was it a good thing? I don't know. I mean, it's certainly good at the time, certainly kept people working. Personally, been furloughed 3 times and bankrupt twice. Nobody ever kept me working. So it was pretty nice to see that kind of, will we ever get that kind of government support again? I don't know. It's only happened once, so we'll see. Pilot hiring, of course, up and down. There's the 5,000, 5,000, 5,000, and then we did 5,000 in the last half of 2021. So this is what it looks like in a table, 400, 5,000, 500. This was going to be 5,000. That's the Great Recession. So in 2008, we took a big financial hit and the hiring didn't come back to full. And then it dropped down. This was JetBlue, hired 30 people in January of 2009, and nobody else hired at a major. That's as low as it had ever gone. So I made a little forecast back in 2023, and it really hasn't changed that much. The major airlines published a fleet plan and a schedule that planned to grow 15%. They couldn't do it. It didn't happen. Pilots weren't available. We've had some planes not available. We got some really serious plane shortages going right now. Regional airlines, they parked 500 multi-million-dollar airplanes, 12 pilots per plane, 6,000 pilots that didn't have jobs because they parked the planes because the majors stole all their captains. Plenty of people that wanted to be co-pilots. Doesn't do any good to have a co-pilot if you don't have a captain to put with them. Corporate aviation,
Yep.
You had, you couldn't find a used airplane, a new airplane. You couldn't find a corporate pilot. Uh, at least 10% short, about 2.5 pilots per plane. And the military, the Air Force will tell you they're 2,000 fighter pilots short. Finding exact numbers in that area are tough, but certainly 2,500 pilots is a reasonable number. There's 24,000 pilots that weren't working, due to a combination of COVID, supply of aircraft, that type of thing. So we need to sort of realize that this aircraft issue is sort of big. I've got some slides on it. So, pilot hiring, past, present, future, U.S. economy recovered, return to profitability. It's important that we sort of think of our business as a commodity business, and we don't really think of it that way. But this is airline seats bolted into airplanes, and we get to fly the planes. But the airliner is the loaf of bread. God forbid, a dozen eggs. It's a commodity. There's a lot of different providers, a lot of different. We got whole wheat, sourdough. We got all the different varieties of the commodity provided by a wide group, and we ride and fall with that commodity. And regrettably, a lot of it, fuel prices and so forth, we don't control. So we are riding this ship of the general economy, which is the demand for our commodity. It's a little scary because we don't control a lot of it. But if we think of it that way, we'll understand what happens if there's a recession or a boom. We're going to, and the lack of equipment, which is, and I'll get into that with some slides a little bit later, but we have probably 1,000 airplanes short of where we would have been had the manufacturers been able to deliver what was already ordered. They just did. United last year was supposed to get 100 Boeings. They didn't get any.
Wow.
Luckily they found 50 Airbuses to fill in the whole used Airbuses. But this equipment issue is big. So we've got the not certified 7 and 10. They're being built. They just can't be delivered because they're not certified. We got the slower production after the door blew out on the 900 and the other models, and including the 787. We've got Airbus with a geared turbofan engine, making the fan blades out of a powdered metal. Seemed like a good idea. Does not turn out to be as durable as it was supposed to be. So those airplanes have to be inspected. Well, maintenance is pretty well sold out. So getting an inspection slot, and then if it needs to be repaired, a repair slot, and the parts are all an issue. And they thought, oh, this will be over, give it a year. Well, it's been a year, and now they're saying 2 more years. It went to 650 airplanes parked worldwide. Now we're at 850. They're saying it's over. I'm not so sure. The average engine off the wing of an Airbus is off the wing for a year. Wow. So we got 850 airplanes with an average engine no good for a year. So this is a big problem. This is probably going to take the longest to resolve. Obviously going to take a while. The other one, certification, that, if they gave that the Omni VOR and certified them, that would be over tomorrow. And the production rates come up from 32 to 40, was supposed to be 52 2 years ago. So all those airplanes that were between 30 and 52 that didn't get built, we're short those airplanes. So a little bit of a silver lining perhaps is, had the airlines grown their 15% and gotten these 1,000 airplanes, we would probably have too much supply right now. And they've done that over and over again in their history. So restricting the supply of airplanes may have dampened the increase, and it may dampen the decrease, the ups and downs that are inevitable in our industry. So I don't know if you want to call that a silver lining, but it may reduce or prevent furloughs in the future because we didn't overhire to fill this massive equipment order that we turned out we couldn't fill. Cargo did really well. Of course, if you look at a wide body airplane and look where the windows are, you can see the windows are like the top third and the bottom 2/3 are freight. And we don't really think about that much. But in COVID, when those passenger airplanes stopped flying because they didn't want to go to Japan and quarantine for 2 weeks, we lost that underneath the airplane cargo space, and the dedicated cargos went crazy. And the other airlines, I know United was flying 777s with cargo in the cabin. They were just doing everything they could to move cargo. So that's the passenger market is back, and that cargo space is back, and they've leveled off and maybe even gone down slightly, but they're still ahead of where they would have been at 2019. So domestic recovered first, international finally back. It took it a while. Simple fleets, people like Southwest and people with one or two airplanes did not suffer the consequences of cutting back and regrowing the airline with all these different airplanes to staff. So domestic single fleet airlines were best positioned to recover from COVID, and they did. They did really well, took a big chunk of market share. I'll show you some charts on that here in a bit. So furloughs, really were no furloughs prior to the recent one, still just a handful. I mean, it's true that Spirit furloughed a few. They also happen to have grown 500 to 600% since we started our chart. So, I mean, yeah, they're down a little bit, but they're up way, way up. So hiring projections, we've made a bunch of those. Like I said, they warned 10,000 and CARES pretty much saved it. Offset with early retirement, leave of absence, job sharing, estimate about 5,000 between the big three were early retired. No furloughs we talked about. My forecast in the past have been pretty close. You know, I take a lot of hits. One of the hidden things is utilization. So I've made forecasts in the past when I had a large membership organization and people accused me of just trying to sell memberships. Well, I was trying to sell memberships, but I really believed and still know that utilization is a hidden factor. So when you look at COVID, there's a whole bunch of airplanes in the desert, lower utilization on the airplanes we had. And then when it starts to recover, they pull the airplanes out of the desert, they up the utilization on the ones they got. And all of a sudden you go from 8 hours to 12 hours a day. Well, how many more pilots do you need if you go from 8 to 12? You need 50% more pilots. And then some people say, well, we'll just increase the utilization on the pilot. Can't do that. There's rules about that. So you really have to have more pilots if you're going to use your airplanes more. And that has been the secret. I've got some charts on that too. So this is an older chart. The point is that a lot of aircraft on order and option is an important factor, and it comes about from airlines that are profitable. So if you make money, what do you do with the money? Well, you buy planes and fly more routes, hire more pilots. So we're looking for airlines that can be consistently profitable in order to propel our career in the future. So this is what happened. This is March of 22, and North America made a dramatically better recovery than everybody else. And CARES is clearly responsible for that by keeping people working, planes flying, airlines operational. So equipment growth, forecast by Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, Embraer, everybody is going to get a lot bigger. We're no longer the fastest growing, and we won't be the largest area for long, with the Pacific taking over with a rapid growth rate and a huge area in population that hasn't really been introduced to flying yet. So their standard of living is coming up and they can afford flying, and they're going to be the biggest markets before long. Idea of the chart, the left is factual, the right is forecast. Is it a believable trend? I believe it is. It's believable that the demand for our commodity can grow. This one just shows the downturn at 9/11 and the Great Recession, and there's a wiggle every 7 to 10 years. And if a person doesn't plan on that, you're imprudent. It's coming. I mean, at COVID, there was a forecast wrinkle on the chart. We didn't know what it would be. Turned out to be COVID, but every 7 to 10 years, it's going to happen. So don't buy your captain's house, airplane, and boat early. You need to put a little bit away and save, because these changes are inevitable. They've happened over and over again. They're doing better. Airlines are doing a better job of managing their business, but not good enough to prevent the ups and downs. This is the historical RPMs. You can see 9/11 and COVID and the Great Recession pretty easy there. This is one of my favorite charts, older chart, but I've never seen a chart that better shows the relationship between airline profits and GDP. When I say we're in a commodity business, this pretty much explains it. Commodities doing well during good domestic growth, and it does poorly when it shrinks. And that's our fear. And of course, we're supposed to have a recession ever since COVID, and it hasn't happened. Is it going to happen? It's going to happen eventually. And if I say that, I can be right, because I know it will happen in the future. What will the cause be and when will it be? Much harder to forecast. Here's another one I like. This shows the general economy took a hit at the Great Recession, but the airlines took a greater hit. So not only do we mimic the general economy, but we exaggerate its trend. So if it's up, we're way up. We're down. The old joke is if they cancel vacation, stand by for the furlough. That's the old joke. So be careful.
We'd like to thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Creating Tailwinds podcast with your hosts, John and Jared. As always, we welcome your questions and critiques. You can reach us through the Contact Us tab at flightpathfinancial.com. Remember, it's all about how you think. As Nelson Nash has said about infinite banking, give it your close attention, and it can make a radical improvement in your financial future.